welcome to the Brookdale Visiting Writers Series. My name is Suzanne Parker. I'm the co-director of the Creative Writing Program here and part of the English faculty. Today, I'm thrilled to be talking with critically acclaimed best-selling author Timothy O'Brien. Tim's fiction and nonfiction books have won numerous awards, including a National Book Award. He's been a finalist for a Pulitzer Prize, the National Book Circle's Critics Award, and numerous others. Tim is considered one of the leading authors on the Vietnam experience, and his most recent books, including Tomcat and Love and July, July, continue with some of the themes of his earlier work, but also open up to a discussion of love and what it's like to live on beyond the war. So I'm very excited to have you on the show today, Tim. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. You know, I have to start because I was reading up about you a little bit before this, and I read that you are a magician.
I am.
Yeah.
I'm so
you've been doing it since
you
you were a kid?
I've done it since I was a little boy, yeah. I've done magic my whole life. Every Christmas, every birthday, I ask for a magic trick, and usually I'll get a little something.
Now, is it like sleight of hand? Do you do
I do it
like
all.
vanishings, conjurings?
I got kids floating around the house, and my wife popping out of boxes and toasters. And whatever it is, I really love it.
Yeah.
So I think it's part of whatever the vibe is that made me into a writer of illusion and magic happening on the page and people waking up from the dead. I think the two go hand in hand in pretty obvious ways in some cases. Both require lots and lots of practice. There's a performance aspect to writing as there is to magic.
Making a bunny come out of a hat.
Yeah. It's fun to fool people.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because when I think of your work, and I mean, you have so many books, but again and again, magic kind of pops up.
It does.
Into them. There's, magical elements in Lake in the Woods and going after Cacciato.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem like it's magic realism, because in a way, magic realism, the magic is meant to be real and ordinary. I kind of wonder how the magic functions. It often seems to be an illusion, a way of self-deception or something like that.
Well, the way any novel is magical in the sense that it presents the illusion of things happening. You're lying in bed and you're reading Jane Austen or whatever you're reading in any book. And then if the book is convincing enough and the dialogue is well crafted enough and the story is engaging enough and so on, you sink into it and you forget that it's not absolutely unfolding. In fact, it never unfolded in the real world. And I think that's true of any book. And I take it a little farther than that. I like to have dead people talk, and I like to have the seemingly impossible, or at least improbable, occur in my books. And they have throughout. I've yet to write a work of, as far as I can remember, my memory's gone, but I don't think I've ever written a work of strict realism or naturalism. Some little miracle will pop up now and then. And that's the way the world seems to me in a lot of ways, too. Little miracles happen now and then.
Is that how you think of magic in the books, then? That these are the miracles, these are the things that shift my story and my characters?
Yeah, it's the surprise the world delivers to us, the miracle of love, or bad miracles, A guy flying a plane into a skyscraper, somebody surviving, the flying of a plane into the skyscraper is its own miracle. The miracle of coincidence, when 30 years after, some boyfriend dumps you or girlfriend, you encounter them in Grand Central Station. And out of all the trillions of people in the world, and there's an element of coincidence to it, but there's also an element of the miraculous that is what life delivers to us now and then. Life is not, at least in my experience, which is pretty limited really, but in my experience, life is not full of the routinely mundane. It's now and then leavened or spiced by what feels like little miracles, little acts of magic.
Have you ever thought of actually just doing it and writing a whole book about, a magician?
It's occurred to me, but I had a pretty good dose of it in the Lake of the Woods where my main character was a magician as a kid and performs a kind of magic an evil kind of magic throughout the rest of his life. It's the magic of deception and withholding things from the world, from his wife, and he's a politician, so from the electorate. This kind of
Its own kind of magic there.
Yeah, there's the magic of secrecy and both deception and self-deception. So I think in that book I kind of exhausted the magic theme, at least in its most overt form.
Well, in July and Tomcat and Love, it does definitely move away a bit from that.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because when I think of your work, also there's a sense of movement. I think I read in an interview, or I heard in an interview you did at a Swanee Writers Conference, that you talk about movement, that as a fiction writer, movement, you think, is of character and of plot is really important. You talked about Gatsby and this wonderful scene in Gatsby with the description of that. And I was wondering if you could just kind of, do you still feel that sense of the importance of it?
I think novels are not still lives or short stories or even poems. They're animated, and there's a sense of motion and not of a static photograph of whatever the subject might be. And too often, it seems, beginning writers do still lives. They set a scene for, it seems, pages and pages, and they arrange their characters on the stage and poses and so on. But there's not the characters don't, in less wholly developed fiction, don't seem to move through life. Don't cut a swath through life. And it reads to me static and not too convincing. And I prefer motion. I don't mean elaborate motion, just a conversation is a kind of motion, going back and forth. That can be a kind of movement. And of course, behavioral movements. You can talk about robbing a bank for a long time, but at some point to watch somebody rob a bank, if they've been doing it for 50 pages, wouldn't be too bad. Or to see them cop out and not rob the bank, instead do whatever they do, but at least see them do something. That it said, oh, there's this politician named John Mitchell who was Attorney General under Nixon. And during the Watergate hearings, he said, don't judge us by what we say, judge us by what we do. And we did. We sent him to jail, in fact, by what he did. And that's what I think readers want in books. They want characters not just to converse or think, but to behave in the world, to make their choices or fail to make them.
That's a kind of old writing maxim, show, don't tell.
Yeah, it is in part, only through movement.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny, when I think of your books, and just within the structure of your novels and the nonfiction, most of them aren't really traditionally structured, it seems. They move forward and backwards, and they spin around a couple times, and then they sit down for a while, get back up, jump back forward. You get different perspectives, everything. I mean, your form, your structures are fascinating, and I'm just wondering.
I think it's because I don't know how to write a linear traditional novel.
Somehow I don't quite believe that.
I don't think I do. I don't think I. At least I probably know how. I guess I do, although I never tried. But it's that I don't trust it. It would be like dressing up in funny clothing for me. It would feel artificial not to have a cap on and jeans and a sweater. If I were here in a suit, and to dress myself up in the clothing of beginning, middle, end would feel so fakey to me. It wouldn't be me. It would feel like I'm impersonating Upton Sinclair or somebody. I don't know who it would be. But it certainly wouldn't be the person I'm comfortable with myself, because the world has never come at me in that strict, linear way. It comes at me in globs of stuff, This person is a glob in my life, and then I'll forget the next 2 weeks of my life or year of my life, and then something will occur which will stick to my memory or adhere in some way. And then another vanishing thing will occur, and it feels so. I tend to write that way, in which I do away with the intervening material or the interstices, and there'll be that event and then this event, and they're not always chronological. Certainly not in memory. Where I can't. 10 years ago, I can't remember what happened first and what happened next. I have no recollection. So the stuff is organized more around import, or what scenes were important to me in whatever way, and I tend to organize my books that way.
They also, like, I think of the things they carried, which is, I think, one of your most famous books, and the title story being, I think, in practically every anthology out there at this point.
In all of them.
As a college freshman who hasn't read it. But it's a wonderful story. It's, a story of lists in a way. But just the collection as a whole, I mean, you revisit the same experiences again and again. And just at a very basic level, like, I wonder how you go about organizing it. Did you have that in mind? Is that what simply occurs? Is it conscious that you want to create a fractured linear experience to sort of reflect the fractured experience of these men in war? And I should say, it's a collection of stories about soldiers in Vietnam in a unit. Is it a conscious choice on your part?
I don't think so, no. It's delivered. Structure and story are both delivered to me by the material. The way stories come to me, it'd be a little scrap, a little line, probably the way it would come to a poet. A line comes to me. First Lieutenant Jimmy Cross carried letters from a girl named Martha. And there's a comma and a hesitation in my writing memory. A junior at Mount Sebastian College in New Jersey. It's all a mystery to me. Who's Jimmy Cross? What are the letters about? Who's Martha? Where's Mount Sebastian? But if the line has a cadence that just appeals to my rhythm of the world, it's got a kind of a long cadence, and I'm ordinarily a pretty taut writer. So a sentence like that intrigued me, and I wanted to know who's Jimmy and who's Martha, what's up with the letters. And the rest of the story was sort of just by trying to satisfy my curiosity about these people. And I gently nudge it along by the next sentence. It's a mystery until it's written. And that'll engender another little mystery. Yeah, okay, we know that. Now what? So the fractured quality, it comes from, I suppose, an absence of planning. That is, I don't outline or... As
I say, it doesn't sound like you're one of these novelists sitting down going, this will be chapter 1, this will be chapter 2.
I don't do that. There are writers who do that and do it successfully. But to me, it would be, if I were to write that way, it would be a lot like those, remember those games as kids where you connect the dots? And I'd feel like I'd be connecting dots, and it wouldn't feel like I was investigating anything, but rather just fulfilling a kind of preset formula.
Kind of coloring within the lines.
Yeah.
On that note, we do need to take a break. My name's Suzanne Parker, and we are talking with the author Tim O'Brien. Please come back after the break.
Impossible!
When you open a book, you can explore new lands, meet new friends, and discover new adventures. There are amazing possibilities when you open your mind to reading. You can log onto the Library of Congress website and let the journey begin.
When you fill someone's life with hope, you wind up adding a little more to your own. Help America's youth. Be a friend. Be a mentor. Just be there.
Go to bigbrothersbigsisters.org.
Prevention First is a nonprofit agency in Monmouth County that offers educational programs dedicated to strengthening the foundation of our children's lives. Please call 732-663-1800.
Redefine your world. Join the Peace Corps.
Apply now at peacecorps.gov.
Hi, and welcome back to the Brickdale Visiting Writers Series. My name is Suzanne Parker, and I am talking today with Tim O'Brien. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Before the break, you were actually talking about, in essence, your process. It starts with one sentence and your cadences. And this is something I've always hugely admired about your work, and I'm about to novelist slam. So this is awful, but I'm a poet. And as a poet, I'll spend an entire day sweating out an versus a the. And novels tend to move with character and action. The story goes forward. But your novels, every sentence, it just seems so carefully crafted. There seems such attention just to language and sound and syntax.
In a way, it's a blessing, another way, a curse. But I like a poet, rhythm matters, and I sweat out the thes and the uhs. I sweat out syllables, the sound of a sentence. That to have two sentences that are identical side by side has an artificial harmony I think is ugly. And I'll find a way, how do I add an extra little beat here or take away a beat here? Issues of word choice. You don't want to be too over the top with your verbs, but you don't want to be too generic and Walmart-y. So you want to have something fresh and unique without being artificial. And so I do the battle that I think Ezra Pound did, and Eliot and you do, which is the battle of fresh language and a certain sense of sound to the prose that no matter how wonderful a plot or a group of characters, it all floats on a sea of language. And if the language is ugly, down goes the plot, and down goes this group of characters. They're drowning in crappy writing.
Yeah, well, it's absolutely wonderful. And every time I read your book, it's like a poet writing a novel.
Thank you.
It really is. And it so exposes my prejudices as well. I was going to say, get angry novelists call in going, "You're saying I'm wordy?"
Yeah, it can be, I'll tell you.
But you hear the cadences in your writing. And Tomcat in Love, actually, which is a book about, well, actually, I should let you. You want to describe Tomcat in Love?
It's hard to describe. It's my best book, I think. It's a book that not many critics like, but I think with other books, I reread them and I'll find flaws here and there or things I would change. But Tomcat has me laughing and surprised throughout the whole book. And in a way, I can't believe I wrote it. Why? Because I'm surprised by what occurs on the page as I turn the pages. It's about a relentlessly sexist man. He's just, and by relentless, I mean he's just from beginning to end relentless. He's abased and humiliated and then just gets up, dusts himself off, and commits the next act of horrid sexism. One after the other, oblivious to the social world and fabric of the social world he lives in, oblivious
it's an
to politics.
Record of sexism.
Just oblivious to everything. He was.
I'm afraid to ask, where did this character come from?
Bill Clinton. I was writing it during the Clinton era, during the Monica thing. And
is Chippering the character Clinton?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it is Clinton, but Clinton certainly informed. I mean, he made me raise the stakes. Because if you recall his incredible justifications for all the things he was doing, his explanations were so elaborate and so strange, and he was so self-justifying. And I thought, man, I want to follow this man's lead. He's our captain after all, and I want to follow the lead. And then it's based somewhat on my own experience of coming back from Nam, and the sexual revolution had occurred pretty much when I was there, that we'd gone over the edge. So I'd gone over kind of Ozzie and Harriet, world I lived in, a kind of an old world with old values and old hierarchies, and returned to a world that stunned me. If I remember coming back and going to an anti-war rally in Minneapolis, and Jerry Rubin was speaking. And in the midst of an anti-war rally, there was this kind of feminist thing occurring that I didn't know about, and on the stage. And I turned to a friend and said, "What's this got to do with that?" And I found out in a hurry. It was a woman I asked. I found out how. It was little. In terms of discourse, of when to use the word girl and when to use the word woman, and was there an age, and when I'd find out I get batted around, I'd use the word woman at the wrong time and girl. So it was this adjustment when you're not there for the happening of the movement, and you're not present for the making of it, and you kind of just enter the door. It's a little bit like walking into Paris without knowing the language, and so it's based a little bit on that. And then I made the guy a linguistic professor. I wanted to have fun with language in this book. And use language as in this self-justifying sort of way. He's footnoting all his evil behaviors and finding the
footnotes
most
are hysterical.
arcane justifications, for his acts of evil. I mean, and I find it funny.
You seem to really like this character.
He's
cracking you
I
up,
like
at
him
least.
as a character. I'm not sure I'd want to spend a lot of time in the real world with him. You might like him more than I do.
He's a difficult guy to like a little bit, but
Yeah.
it's a whole. I mean, it's funny because honestly, I'm a woman. I kind of hate this guy.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he's just so lost
I'm
and
so
so
lost.
pathetic.
Yeah.
And it's just he
pathetic.
does keep dusting himself off and trying again and again and again, and even at
He just tries the wrong stuff.
the perseverance,
Yeah,
and it all comes from a
perseverance.
place of weakness and fear, I think, in the character too. I mean, there's a real touching quality to the character, amongst all sort of
I guess. That
the sexist.
I guess it's just like watching a failure, and for me at least, a funny one. That but yeah, he's got a disgusting aspect to him.
Did you have fun writing this book? Because the book before this
Oh, yeah.
was Lake in the Woods, and then the things I carried and going
I think
after
that's part of it. It come off an extremely grim book and macabre book, even in the Lake of the Woods, and
It's very dark.
a macabre, grim part of my life where just the world just seemed to be relentlessly evil and bad things happening all around me, and it helped me, I think, to write a book a comedy, to lighten up a little and get a smile back on my face and not walk around with this doomy attitude I had. And in a way, Tomcat saved my life, I think. I was in pretty bad shape, and to force myself to write a book that was about failure and about a kind of almost unconscious blunderer. That was a little bit about what I was back, in '94 or so when I began writing it. I was a little unconscious and I was blundering, trying to find my way through the world. And it took me out of that, being able to laugh at me.
July also, it's about, is it 1969 reunion of college friends coming back together. I mean, both of these books shift away from direct, there are, is vet and all the rest in the books, but they shift away from directly addressing the war. I mean, I can't imagine, never having fought a war, but this is something that is gone from you. But do you feel that as a writer, you are moving on beyond the material?
In a way, both books contain Vietnam. Vietnam doesn't end when you sign a peace treaty or the years go by. It transforms itself. It's inside your soul. It can turn some of us cynical or bitter. It can also enliven one's idealism in a strange kind of way. But it lives on only in other forms, the memory. And we do all, after all, have to keep, unless you want to kill yourself, keep living your lives and pressing forward. But it changes us. I guess any trauma does. A bad marriage or a concentration camp or whatever it might be is going to make changes. And the story doesn't always have to be concentration camp, marriage. It can be the stuff, the internal stuff that you carry out of something and into a new setting or a new world in which the characters find themselves. So Vietnam still haunts my characters, although not as directly as it once did.
It's funny because I mean, you mentioned say the name Tim O'Brien. I mean, you are one of the leading authors on the Vietnam experience, and have 3 incredible books on it that are kind of the books in a way. And I always kind of wondered if that becomes a burden, like you've become the Vietnam author, And,
in a way, but in a way not. I mean, the world does that work for you. You have no control over how people talk about you. When I'm sitting in my underwear in front of a word processor day by day, I don't think of myself as a soldier or Vietnam vet. It doesn't even occur to me. I forget sometimes that I was in Vietnam. Not sometimes, all the time. What I'm concerned about is what we first started talking about. I'm concerned on a daily basis with the sound of a sentence and what I might discover from the sentence about the world or about myself. And those are my concerns. And the Vietnam business is a little bit like what probably Conrad probably went through in his life when, oh, you're a C writer, or Toni Morrison, oh, you're a black writer, or Updike, you're a suburb writer. I mean, it's a shorthand way of talking about a body of work. And I think it's inevitable. I think, Shakespeare is a king writer. I mean, you could take any writer and, put him in. So I don't, it doesn't mean much to me, really.
Yeah.
What does mean something to me is a page of prose or a sentence. That means something to me.
You talked about kind of sitting in the chair on a daily basis. You teach writing.
A
Well.
little.
A little bit.
I wouldn't call myself a teacher.
We've got just a couple minutes left, but is there advice you give people other than maybe, kind of get your butt in the chair? And actually, I wouldn't know if that you would necessarily give them that
That's
advice.
primarily my advice.
Is it?
It primarily is.
Sorry, I took your line.
There's a lot of, you know what I'm talking about. When there's so many people say, I got a great idea for a poem or a novel, but they don't take the time and care to do it. And there's a lot of dreaming that goes on. Another piece of advice that I give, always tentatively, and I'm almost always pressed to give advice because I don't know any good advice, is to try to be your best self when you're writing. That is, you're not the person who, I'm not the Tim O'Brien that you're talking to now when I'm doing what I'm doing, when I'm writing. I'm a different Tim O'Brien. I'm the Tim O'Brien who cares about that syllable and the sound of that prose, and does that bit of dialogue ring true, and does it carry meaning with it?
I hate to say it, but I'm going to have to interrupt.
I'm good. I'm
both
done.
Tim O'Briens, the one who cares about cadence and the one who has written these the same person who's written these marvelous books. Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for talking with us. We've been talking with Tim O'Brien, the author of many, many best-selling books, and it's just been a delight talking with you. Thanks for listening to the show.